I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Tuesday, January 6th. Prime Minister Mark Carney arrived in Paris on Monday ahead of high-level talks with Ukraine's allies, focused on long-term security guarantees to prevent Russia from launching another invasion if a ceasefire is reached. The meeting brings together members of what's being called the Coalition of the Willing, including Canada, France, and several other European nations. Leaders met today as they pushed to speed up efforts towards a negotiated peace. About 30 countries took part in the talks. They come amid a shakeup in Kyiv, where President Volodymyr Zelensky has been reshaping his government. Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke with reporters this morning ahead of the meeting.
It's an important meeting this afternoon between President Zelensky, the U.S. representatives of this peace process, Mr. Witkoff, Mr. Kushner, and the leaders of the core of the Coalition of the Willing, obviously including Canada. Our main objective is to finalize the security guarantees amongst ourselves which create the possibility of a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. We will also be having discussions around the economic plan, advancing that work, the so-called prosperity plan for Ukraine. All of this is part of a 20-point peace plan that has been negotiated. I will use the assessment of President Zelensky that, in effect, in his judgment, we are 90% of the way there to peace. The final elements need to be negotiated on a tripartite basis, United States, Ukraine, and Russia.
Carney was also asked about security guarantees that Canada can offer Ukraine.
The first line of defense, obviously, is the Ukrainian armed forces, and one of the elements of the 20-point plan, peace plan, is going to be the size of the Ukrainian armed forces, which is considerable as it's negotiated now, so the size would be very large. Secondly, there is monitoring and other support, logistics support that would be provided, training support to make sure that the Ukrainian armed forces over the medium term and longer term can defend themselves. Then the backstops become the Coalition of the Willing Forces, so-called multilateral force, of which Canada would be a member under this framework, and very importantly, the United States is playing a backstop role. Do we have so to get to your specific question, do we have the bench strength, to use your term? Well, we've been building that bench, and we're going to continue to build that bench. The largest military buildup in generations, coming over the course of the next 5 years, an additional $80 billion of investment, in part because of issues like this, very importantly because of issues in our perimeter. I'll point specifically to the Canadian Arctic as an example there. So yes, we do. There would need to be a redeployment. But the last point I'll make, and just to put in context, which, of course, we're stronger together. So we're as part of a coalition, as part of a multilateral force, coming behind and coming with the Americans. That means that our contribution has a much bigger effect than obviously we would if we were on our own.
Liberal MP Chrystia Freeland said Monday that she's stepping down as the Prime Minister's special representative for the reconstruction of Ukraine and will leave Parliament in the coming weeks. This comes hours after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky appointed her as an unpaid advisor on economic development in his country. Prime Minister Mark Carney addressed Ms. Freeland's new position.
Ms. Freeland, Chrystia, has served our country for well over a decade in a formal role as a parliamentarian, certainly in a number of ministerial posts, and served with great distinction. She was, I had her as my special envoy after she left cabinet for the Ukraine reconstruction. Judgment became her judgment that she could be more useful for that process as she was leaving, as she was retiring as a parliamentarian, as a direct advisor. My judgment was that taking that role would be consistent with resigning as an MP, and I welcomed her doing that, and I'm pleased that for Ukraine, and again, if I can reemphasize and bring it back to today, there is real momentum. Nothing's assured, but there's real momentum in this peace process, and the security guarantees are incredibly important. but as is the reconstruction and the prosperity plan, and she'll be there to work on that. And look, we'll have a by-election. There'll be a few by-elections coming up, and we'll run great candidates, and the people in those ridings will decide who they want to send to Parliament.
I sat down with our correspondent Adam Zivo for more on Miss Freeland's new role. Adam, thank you so much for the time today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I want to start with why Zelensky would have chosen Freeland for this role.
So the official justification is that he said that she was great at attracting investments and that she had a good grasp of the economy, and he wanted her to advise him on how to reconstruct Ukrainian society and the Ukrainian economy after the war. But I think realistically speaking, he wants Freeland's contacts and her connections to the Canadian elite in order to attract investment and donations going forward.
And what do we know about what the role actually entails?
I mean, so we know very little, but from what has been reported, so Freeland is supposed to attract investment and to liaise with Canadian business leaders and civil society leaders, and as well as to work with the Canadian Ukrainian community.
And how relevant is it that this role is unpaid?
Well, it it's complicated, right? So when this rule was initially announced, so Zelensky announced it, and at the time, it seemed as if Freeland was going to stay as an MP, right? And he didn't initially let everyone know that this is an unpaid position, and so people thought that she might be double dipping. And then there was a huge conflict of interest. Then she clarified a few hours later that this is an unpaid position, that she is stepping down as an MP, and I guess that's better than her being paid because it shows that she is doing this out of a genuine passion for the country. I mean, Freeland has always been a major supporter of Ukraine. She visited the country when she was young. She's been one of the world's most adamant supporters. S- So, I mean, that's great. But honestly, right now, we just don't have enough information to fully understand the implications here.
Well, and as you mentioned, we know that Freeland has now said that she will resign her seat in Parliament, but she did face criticism for not making that clear or making that decision earlier. Why was there a lack of clarity?
Who knows? So it could have been a miscommunication. It could have been that Zelensky's office was too eager to announce it and didn't consider the political implications in Canada. From my understanding, from my contacts in Ukraine, the president's office isn't always on top of things when it comes to international relations and media. So there's that. But it could also just have been that maybe Freeland didn't have good political instincts here and that she thought she could pull this off and that she thought that maybe she could get away with being both an advisor to Ukraine and an MP. Obviously, she faced a lot of criticism in the Canadian press for that. The Globe and Mail ran a critical op-ed. The National Post just ran a critical op-ed. So it's unclear right now whether that changed her mind or whether she always intended to resign as an MP in the next coming weeks.
And some on the conservative side of politics have raised the criticism that Freeland's record on the economy is not one to replicate. Is there merit to that, or is that just a partisan politics?
I mean, I think it's arguable. I mean, some people may disagree on it, but I don't think that her economic record is too strong. And when we look at the record of the Trudeau government, what we see is a decade of stagnation. And so if she was responsible for economic development during some of this period, I don't think she can flaunt that as a major win on her end. And some have argued that she was better at essentially spending a lot of taxpayer money to bribe people to bring jobs to Canada, even though these investments weren't very efficient. And that's no way to run an economy. But at the same time, if she's very good at attracting investment, even if she doesn't deploy it super efficiently, then that might be an asset in Ukraine's case where maybe she can be good at pulling in donors. And then once the money is in Ukraine, someone else who is more competent, who maybe has an actual background in economics, because let's not forget, Freeland's background is in journalism, can deploy that capital more efficiently.
Now, Freeland served as Canada's finance minister for quite a few years. Is it not a little bit of a conflict of interest that she's now taken this role pretty much as the same role in a different country after being so close in Canada's inner circle?
It's complicated, right? So I think that because she is stepping down as an MP and removing herself from government after taking this role, although there'll be a few weeks where she'll be in both positions, I think it's okay, it's acceptable, uh, because she's not doing both jobs at the same time, at least excluding these few weeks. I think that the question here is how much regulation do we have in terms of her ability to lobby her former contacts?
Coming up after the break, international reaction is pouring in after the Trump administration announced the arrest of Nicolas Maduro. We'll hear from ambassadors to Venezuela and Cuba after the break. Ambassadors to Venezuela and Cuba chimed in on the Trump administration's arrest of Nicolas Maduro and extraditing him from the United States for trial. Venezuela's ambassador to the UN, Samuel Moncada, spoke on the actions taken against Maduro and their consequences for the upholding of international law.
While General Assembly Resolution 2625 establishes that the territory of a state shall not be subject to military occupation as a result of the use of force in contravention of the UN Charter. Allowing such acts to go without an effective answer would amount to normalizing the replacement of law by might, while eroding the very foundations of the collective security system. Today, it is not only Venezuela's sovereignty that is at stake, the credibility of international law, the authority of this organization, and the validity of the principle that no state can set itself up as a judge, party, and executor of the world order are also at stake.
Following that, Cuba's ambassador criticized the Trump administration's actions against Venezuela, calling it imperialist in nature. This comes after Donald Trump suggested that Cuba could be a future target for U.S. military aggression.
The U.S. military attack against Venezuela has no justification whatsoever. It does not respond to any provocation, nor does it possess legitimacy. It is based on the aberrant doctrine of peace through force and undermines the stability and peace that have characterized our Latin American and Caribbean region for years. It seeks to promote a change in the constitutional order of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, freely chosen by its people. Its ultimate objective is not the false narrative of combating drug trafficking, but control over Venezuela's land and natural resources, as has been openly and shamelessly declared by President Trump and his Secretary of State. This is an imperialist and fascist aggression with objectives of domination that seeks to revive the U.S. hegemonic ambitions over our America, anchored in the outdated Monroe Doctrine. It also seeks to intimidate and subjugate the governments of Latin America and the Caribbean.
And oil markets are reacting to the turmoil in Venezuela. North American oil prices climbed more than 1% on Monday, while shares of several major Canadian oil and gas companies moved lower. By midday, a barrel of West Texas Intermediate was trading about 1.5% higher, up nearly $1 to just over 58 US dollars. Even with that bump, prices remain relatively low, about $15 cheaper than they were a year ago. At the same time, energy stocks were under pressure. The TSX Energy Index was down roughly 4.5% by midday, reflecting concerns about uncertainty in the sector. And foreign policy experts say Canada should be reaching out to other countries that feel threatened by the United States to coordinate a response to Washington's actions in Venezuela. The U.S. stunned the world this weekend by capturing Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in a military raid, following months of airstrikes on boats Washington says were involved in drug trafficking. UBC professor Max Cameron says the move could signal the start of a new U.S. security strategy aimed at exerting greater control across the Americas. He says Ottawa should be talking with countries like Mexico, Panama, Cuba, and Greenland to develop a united approach to defend national sovereignty. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says the American capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro underlies the urgency of building oil pipelines to export Canadian oil to new markets. U.S. President Donald Trump sent political shockwaves around the world with the weekend military raid, saying Washington aimed to seize the South American country's oil reserves. Smith says the events emphasize the importance that we expedite the development of pipelines to diversify our oil export markets. That includes a new pipeline to British Columbia's west coast to reach markets in Asia. During an unrelated news conference, Prime Minister Mark Carney was asked about Trump's strikes on Venezuela and what impact this could have on the Canadian oil sector.
You know, from our perspective, the removal of an illegitimate, corrupt, repressive government or leader, Mr. Maduro, is welcome news. It creates the possibility for democratic transition in Venezuela. We very much support that. We're available to support that, and we urge that to happen in a peaceful transition. And that's the best prospect for greater prosperity for the Venezuelan people and to respect the will of the Venezuelan people. Now, a functioning, not corrupt Venezuelan economy will produce more oil. It'll be better for the Venezuelan people. It'll be more stable for the Western Hemisphere. That's all a good thing. Canadian oil, Canadian energy, but I'll speak because you asked specifically about Canadian oil. It's been our view, and we're working towards this, that Canadian oil will be competitive because it is low risk, clearly low risk, low cost, the marginal costs. There's been huge progress in getting down the costs, and low carbon, which is what the Pathways project, carbon capture, will bring. And that makes Canadian oil competitive for the medium and long term. So we welcome the prospect of peace, a peaceful transition, democratic Venezuela. We welcome the prospect of greater prosperity in Venezuela, but we also see the competitiveness of Canadian oil, and we're investing, or we're putting in place measures so that that's going to happen. And in that context, a pipeline and exports to Asia. We've got competitive product, and we'd be diversifying our markets, and that's one of the reasons why we signed the comprehensive MOU with Alberta. So we'll be working towards that.
I'm now joined by the executive chairman for Aspen Leaf Energy, Brian Gould, to discuss the impact the oil industry could face. Mr. Gould, thank you so much for the time today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, it's been widely stated that Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves. What do we know about the size and scale of those reserves, and how does that compare to Canada's reserves?
So first off, let me just step back and address the question of what is a reserve, because that term gets bandied around a lot. So from an operating company standpoint, reserves have to be not just technically viable to be produced, but they have to be economic. And so when countries and regions are throwing around this terminology of reserve, it's not the quite thing as it means in private enterprise. So is there a lot of oil in Venezuela? Absolutely. Is there a lot of oil in Canada? Absolutely. But there's a lot of hydrocarbons in lots of places in the world. And so, are there really 300 plus billion barrels of economically recoverable oil in Venezuela? Well, it depends on the technology, it depends on infrastructure, and it actually depends on the price of oil. And so, I just want to caution people a little bit that this thing about they're going to overwhelm the country or overwhelm Canada, take that with a grain of salt.
Well, there has been a lot of talk about oil prices potentially being depressed if Venezuela can increase output. How vulnerable is Canadian oil if that price per barrel drops?
Well, so I'm reminded of the parable of the gazelle and the lion in Africa, and it goes something like this. The gazelle every morning wakes up and it knows that it has to run faster than the fastest lion, or it's going to be eaten. And the lion wakes up every morning knowing that it has to outrun the slowest gazelle, or it's going to starve to death. And the message of the parable is it doesn't matter whether you're a lion or gazelle, you better be prepared to run fast. And when I translate that to business terms, we have to be a low cost, reliable, stable producer. And I think we need to focus more in Canada on what we can do to enhance our competitive advantage and a little less worried about what the other guy can do. So that would be my strategy for Canada.
Well, Trump's former advisor, John Bolton, had said that any benefit oil wise would be years away, long after Trump is gone. Would you say that this is accurate? And does that mean that any potential negative for Canada could also be a few years away?
Yes, I would agree with that. But I would say, in terms of us growing our production, building new pipelines, we need to get those running shoes on, just like the Lion and the Gazelle do it now, because the expansion of our industry also will take time, and we need to remove all the impediments that currently are in place. And I know the Prime Minister in your clip referred to the MOU. Um, I believe we need to take all the impediments out of place. And this means we need to resolve essentially the veto power that small elements of the First Nations community have over the wishes and benefit for the larger number. And frankly, I don't agree with the Prime Minister on this concept of low carbon production, because that adds costs and, in my view, makes us uncompetitive. Our customers for energy want reliable, low cost energy. And I think we are tying our hands behind our back with things like the Pathways Project, carbon taxes, and discussion of net zero. So the game is on. We have another new competitor in the international marketplace, and we need to have our best game put forward as Canadians if we want to thrive going forward.
Well, Mr. Gould, thank you so much for the time and breaking that down for us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up after the break, several European leaders are pushing back against President Donald Trump's comments about a possible U.S. takeover of Greenland. We'll have this story and more of today's top national and international headlines right after these messages. We'll be right back. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Mike Waltz pushed back against criticism of American military action in Venezuela during an emergency UN meeting on Monday. He insisted the U.S. is not seeking regime change and has no plans to occupy the country. Waltz echoed the Trump administration's position, saying the air and ground operation was not an attack, but a limited use of military force meant to support a law enforcement mission.
This past weekend, colleagues, the United States successfully carried out a surgical law enforcement operation facilitated by the U.S. military against two indicted fugitives of American justice, narco-terrorist Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores. As Secretary Rubio has said, there is no war against Venezuela or its people. We are not occupying a country. This was a law enforcement operation. Colleagues, Maduro is not just an indicted drug trafficker. He was an illegitimate so-called president. He was not a head of state. For years, Maduro and his cronies have manipulated Venezuela's electoral system to maintain their illegitimate grip on power. If the UN and the United Nations in this body confers legitimacy on an illegitimate narco-terrorist and the same treatment in this charter of a democratically elected president or head of state, what kind of organization is this? President Trump gave diplomacy a chance. He offered Maduro multiple off-ramps.
Several European leaders are pushing back against President Donald Trump's comments about a possible U.S. takeover of Greenland. Leaders from France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and the UK joined Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen in defending Greenland's sovereignty. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney was asked about Donald Trump's annexation threats during a press conference.
Of Greenland is a decision for Greenland and for Denmark exclusively. It's their decision. Secondly, from a NATO context, the way I would frame it is that the western flank of NATO, which would include Greenland, the Arctic, is, given the evolving threat environment, is an area that we as NATO, Canada, obviously, importantly, given our geography, need to invest more. And this is a point that we've been making in recent years and since I became Prime Minister, that we've really stressed. And with our buildup, that's just beginning of our military capabilities, we are making heavy investments in the Arctic. We'll be working with our Nordic partners. We'll be working through NATO. This is one of the issues I'll be discussing with the Secretary General as part of an ongoing discussion with him around this to further advance it.
And the Danish Prime Minister said in a statement on Sunday that it makes absolutely no sense to talk about the U.S. needing to take over the country.
Listen to a lot. Threats, pressure, and condescending remarks, even from our closest allies for a generation, about wanting to take over another country and another people as if it was something you could buy and own. That has no place anywhere. We shoulder our responsibility in the world, and it is not us who will seek out conflict. But let there be no doubt, no matter what happens, we will stand firm on what is right and what is wrong.
This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump reiterated his desire to annex Greenland.
We need Greenland for national security, not for minerals. We have so many sites for minerals and oil and everything. We have more oil than any other country in the world. We need Greenland for national security. And if you take a look at Greenland, you look up and down the coast, you have Russian and Chinese ships all over the place.
It appears as though Canada's focus on trade diversification is delivering some good results. With U.S. trade threats and tariff uncertainty, our country has been broadening its trade relationships, and the numbers are starting to show. Our Western Canada Bureau Chief Hal Roberts chatted with Trevor Lewington, the Director of Economic Growth and Engagement at Lethbridge County, who looked at the numbers and says there is some good potential for the Canadian economy.
Now, Trevor, we've seen that exports to the United States declined over the past year. Now, you believe, however, that the decrease has been more than offset by strong growth in other key markets?
That's correct. I mean, exports year over year declined to the U.S. by about $12 billion. That's significant. We obviously recognize that there's some pain for companies in particular that rely on exports to the U.S. But if you look at the top 5 other markets like the UK, Singapore, Indonesia, China, those exports have grown combined by more than 5 billion more than the decline from the U.S. So we've seen a net growth in exports, and it's just a clear indication that that strategy around trade diversification is starting to have a positive impact.
So outside of China, what other Asian markets do you think that maybe Canada can tap into?
Yeah, the great thing about previous Canadian governments have negotiated a wide range of agreements with a number of companies. In fact, Canada has the most trade agreements with the most number of countries than arguably anybody else. And so the entire Asian market, Pacific, the Indo-Pacific region is ripe with opportunity for Canada. The world needs more of everything Canada has and Canada produces. And that, of course, is where there's a growing global population. And so it's prudent to build on both provincial and federal government efforts to explore Asia and opportunities there.
Let's also talk about oil here for just a moment. How important is it to get that pipeline built through northern British Columbia so that we can get more of our resources to those Asian markets?
Yeah, I mean, clearly global demand is increasing in Asia. We need to target those markets. And if the recent situation in Venezuela is any indication, one of the largest reserves of similar oil to ours in that region, of course, it's going to take them a number of years and billions of investment to get it out of the ground. But that's certainly the early indications from the U.S. government are that they're going to support that very actively. Venezuelan oil is exactly the same kind of oil that comes out of Alberta. And so we will be competing with refining capacity in the U.S. That Venezuelan oil potentially is a cheaper alternative long term. So prudent for us now to start thinking about pipelines that take a long time to get approved and to build, and time to now to act and really access other markets like Asia with our oil before Venezuela becomes a real competitor.
Now, Trevor, you say that trade diversification is not just a defensive strategy, but also a growth strategy. Can you explain?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the goal is, of course, to grow exports overall, and we're seeing that happen. I think there's still an opportunity in the U.S. At the end of the day, the United States is, of course, geographically the most close market to us. It's an enormous market. There's still going to be, I think, once the dust settles, opportunities for Canadian companies to grow their exports into the United States and into, the rest of North America. But at the same time, as we grow into other markets, we are, growing the total size of the pie so that we all share more overall. And I think that's just prudent for us. We've been long dependent on one single market, and that's not healthy for any country or any business strategy.
So, how will trade diversification really help us here specifically in southern Alberta?
The great thing about our opportunities in southern Alberta, of course, food, agri-food production, there's global demand. We have a growing global population. Increasingly, parts of the world are hungry for protein. Everything that we can produce here, whether it be animal-based or plant-based. So southern Alberta has a key advantage and I would argue a moral responsibility to help feed the world. But we also have durable manufactured goods. We have high technology research and development happening here. Southern Alberta has, world-renowned expertise in irrigation, for example. We often get visitors from the Middle East come and tour operations in Southern Alberta to better understand the technology. Drones, geospatial technologies that have been developed here are being used all around the world. So it's not just about those commodities. It's not just about the food products we produce, but many, many other industries. Truly, Southern Alberta has all the right ingredients. We just have to make sure we help develop those companies and tap into those global markets where we have the opportunity to support what's going on.
He's the Director of Economic Growth and Engagement at Lethbridge County, Trevor Lewington. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford says he will follow through on his threat to pull Crown Royal whiskey from LCBO shelves once a bottling plant in the Windsor area closes next month. Ford first took aim at the parent company this fall during a widely watched news conference where he slowly poured out a bottle of Crown Royal to protest the planned closure of the company's facility. Crown Royal will continue to be mashed, distilled, and aged in Canada, but Ford remains unconvinced, saying that he can't wait to remove the brand from LCBO shelves if the plant closure goes ahead.
We're also investing $6.4 billion to build and upgrade 58,000 long-term care spaces, with homes for 25,000 residents already under construction or complete, and across more than 150 projects on long-term care. That number always amazes me. I know people are concerned about President Trump's tariffs and the economic uncertainty they're creating, but I also want the people of Ontario to know that I will keep fighting to protect their jobs and protect our province no matter what. We have a mandate to protect Ontario and the year ahead. We will continue getting it done. And I just want to go back to our last press conference. I think there was 4 days. We had an incredible announcement in Niagara Falls. That went right around the world. It went out to Las Vegas. Companies are coming. They want to invest. And I want to thank all the mayors that are pushing this forward in the Niagara region.
Coming up after the break, Sweden wins the World Juniors for the first time since 2012, and Canada takes home bronze. After that, the International Ice Hockey Federation president says he's expecting a fantastic tournament when the Olympics heads to Italy next month. We'll be right back after this. The U.S. has taken the unprecedented step of dropping the number of vaccines it recommends for every child, leaving other immunizations such as flu shots open to families to choose but without clear guidance. Officials say the overhaul to the federal vaccine schedule announced on Monday won't result in any families losing access or insurance coverage for vaccines, but medical experts are slamming the move, saying it could lead to reduced uptake of important vaccinations and increased disease. Dr. Robert Hopkins, a physician with the Foundation for Infectious Diseases, slammed the Trump administration's cuts on vaccines for children.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention announced that they were going to adopt a immunization schedule similar to that's used by Denmark for childhood immunization in the United States. And what that means is that we will no longer have routine recommendation for all of the things that we were recommending our children be vaccinated against. They did not take away recommendations for vaccine, but they changed many of the recommendations from a routine recommendation for all children to a recommendation that the parents and families have a discussion with a healthcare provider before they receive vaccination against RSV, hepatitis B, hepatitis A, meningococcal disease. This is potentially going to cause real challenges in access to vaccines for many children across the United States. While these new recommendations on paper do not take away access to vaccines to children or to families, they may, in reality, take away access, particularly for those who are vulnerable, who don't have easy access to a healthcare professional.
Alarming stats from Alberta Health Services show the number of amputations due to frostbite has gone up substantially in Edmonton, with 81 procedures in 2023 and 120 in 2024. Beth Klingenberg is a nurse and manager of health services at Hope Mission. She says a majority of frostbite cases involves the city's homeless population.
It's going to get worse, it's going to get bigger before it's going to get better, and it's going to take, a lot of resources, a lot of supports, and a lot of action to kind of move that trajectory back into a little bit more of a sustainable way. So it's definitely scary, it's definitely shocking, and of course it's really sad to see. These are people that we know for a long time and are losing limbs and things like that, and so it's really hard to see. So we have a lot of conversations, or at least for the conversations that we can be involved in, we talk a lot about from our side and our perspective that advocacy, and a lot of our clients that see us are the ones that really struggle to fit back into the system. They're the ones that are with us during the day, during the night times, and don't really have somewhere else to be, and often are just less connected to the healthcare system in general. And so we really advocate behalf of them, of saying like this process can be really difficult for them to follow through with. And as well, we're just seeing more and more clients coming here on a regular basis, whether that be the cold or not, but also now because there's so many more, and with this weather, it's really getting quite a lot.
International Ice Hockey Federation President Luke Tardif says he's expecting a fantastic tournament when NHL players return to the Olympics next month, even with some construction delays at the main arena. Speaking Monday at the World Junior Hockey Championship, Tardif acknowledged the venue may not be completely finished, but says the ice, practice rinks, and dressing rooms will all be ready when the men's tournament begins at the Milan Cortina Games on February 11th.
We're going to have a tournament in this building, so that's been on the infrastructure for the ice hockey. I'm talking about the dressing room, I'm talking about the practice area, and the field of play, and that's going to be ready. So that means we can be we're confident on that. You're not going to go in Milano for nothing. We're going to have a fantastic tournament. And I was surprised at the level of what they are at the moment. The MH1 will be not exactly what I expected, because for a tournament of the level we will organize, 11,800, that's a little bit short, but that's like it is. But it will be a nice setup for the Olympic game, and for sure, this competition, we wait since three sessions of Olympic will be done, and I'm confident about the quality of the infrastructure. That's the last moment. We would have liked to sleep much better, but that's like that, and it will be. I think we will have a good competition.
He'll be heading to Italy later this week with NHL and NHLPA officials for a test event. The NHL has warned it won't send players if there are any safety concerns with the ice. And the Swedes are back on top of the World Juniors. For the first time since 2012 and just the second time in the last 44 years, Sweden captured gold at the World Junior Championship, defeating Czechia 4-2 in a nail-biting final in Minnesota. The victory capped off a perfect tournament for the Swedes and delivered a long-awaited gold medal to a program that had often fallen just short on the biggest stage.
Will win their third ever gold medal. Sweden, the World Junior Champions in Minnesota. They take it by a final score of 4-2, and the gold goes to the team in gold.
Canada beat Finland 6-3 to take home the bronze medal at the World Junior Hockey Championship in St. Paul, Minnesota. Zane Parekh set a Canadian record for points from a defenseman with 13.
Now finally bumped to center ice. Misa looks ahead for O'Reilly. That's knocked down. And Vestorina brings it back in, but Canada will leave this World Junior Championship with a bronze medal after a 6-3 win over Finland. And Canada will head to the 2027 World Junior Championship as a top 3 team from this tournament.
Canada will host the next World Juniors in Edmonton and Red Deer, Alberta. I sat down with sports reporter Ryan Eakin to discuss the tournament results and Canada's performance. Ryan, thank you so much for the time.
Absolutely happy to be here.
Now, this is the third year in a row where Canada was knocked out by Czechia in the knockout round. What are Canada's next step forward to get back to their winning ways and dominance in the World Juniors?
Yeah, I don't think they have to change the process at all. I really do think this was the best Team Canada that they could put together given the circumstances of no Macklin Celebrini, no Matthew Schaefer, and even down the road, other guys too, or down the line, I should say, with the likes of Sam Dickinson and Berkeley Cat, and all of these guys would have made a major impact on Team Canada. I mean, if they had Celebrini and Schaefer, this would be a dream team, but it's just the way it ended up being, as it always is for Canada at the World Juniors. The Americans had their full access of guys. Finland, Czechia, Sweden too. It was just Canada that missed so many guys. And I think they really did put together the best team they had. The best guys made up of a lot of first rounders and three capable goaltenders. I think they were just missing one extra defenseman, but it's not like you can go out and trade for that guy or sign a guy in free agency. You're playing for the national team. So I do think it was the best team, and Czechia got them on their worst day.
Now, we see a lot of players from Canada now going to play in the NCAA, like McKenna, Ivankovic, and Verhoff. Is this part of the issue with hockey development falling behind in the CHL and junior hockey in Canada?
I don't think so. I really do think these guys are leaving for one reason and one reason only, and that is money. If NIL money wasn't on the table, Verhoff would not have fast-tracked this past summer to finish high school a year early so he can go play in North Dakota. And same with the other guys. This is all money. I mean, there is talks that Gavin McKenna is making perhaps upwards of $500,000, if not over $500,000 with where he's playing right now. I just, I think it's purely money. The CHL to me is still a great development league. Obviously, they've had issues developing goaltenders the last decade, maybe 2 decades now. But when it comes to developing star talent, this is still a league that has developed Gavin McKenna, going back to his time at Medicine Hat, but also before that, Connor Bedard as well, Matthew Schaefer. I don't think the CHL, is in the business of having issues developing players.
Now, let's shift gears with the upcoming Olympics. There were some players picked that have caught the eye of fans, such as Tom Wilson, Anthony Cirelli, Bo Horvat. Canada's assembling a team to win. Would you agree with that, or do you think that different players should have been selected?
No, I absolutely love the roster. I would have made a couple changes as everyone would have, looking at their own team Canada, whether it's a Sam Bennett or a Mark Scheifele or, a Matthew Schaefer on defense. I do think Matthew Schaefer should have been there over a guy like Thomas Hurley, who has struggled a bit. But even then, you understand Hockey Canada's reasoning. Thomas Hurley was on a beach last year during the Four Nations. Shea Theodore gets hurt. They call him in. And Thomas Hurley was one of Canada's best defensemen, leading them to the championship. So I do think it was the best team they possibly could have taken, all things considered. I'm not surprised that Anthony Cirelli made the team. You look at Team Canada's coach and John Cooper, he has him in Tampa Bay. And Cirelli, he's an all situations player. He's an elite defensive guy, and also he won at the Four Nations last year. He's played for Canada at the World Juniors. He's won going back to his time in Oshawa. All Anthony Cirelli does is win. So even though he may not have been on my Team Canada over a Mark Scheifele or a Connor Bedard, I totally reason with it. Connor McDavid's not going to play the penalty kill for Canada. Nathan McKinnon's not either. You need guys who can play the penalty kill. And yes, some of their higher end guys can. Mitch Marner, Brad Marchand, Brandon Hagel. You need depth guys too. And Anthony Cirelli definitely fits that bill for Canada.
I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, you can always visit our website at forumdailynews.ca. Good night, Canada.